Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming to my legislative breakfast today. My name is Dave McTeague, and this will be the first of, I hope, a long series of legislative breakfasts at Christie's Restaurant in Clackamas, in the middle of North Clackamas County, House District 25. I think it's high time that this area receive better representation in the Oregon House than it's received presently. I think it receives plenty good representation in the Oregon Senate with Senator Walt Brown as its state senator. Topic of today's breakfast is government ethics and campaign spending reform. It seems we have a severe problem in Salem with the special interest trying to run the show instead of the people being represented and having their best interest looked after. The problem down in Salem is that the lobbyists roam the halls of Salem, they hand out the campaign contributions, and all too often they pull in the votes. And this is a persistent problem that we've seen for a long time down there in Salem, and we're trying to do something about it. It's not going to be easy, but the road ahead is long and hard, but it's a fight that if we hang in there, we can win and we can bring better government to Salem and to the state of Oregon. And I think a good place to start is with the legislature and with our representation from Clackamas County. I'll just say a few words about myself because this is the first time I've held a legislative breakfast. I've been a long-time consumer advocate. I've been a member of the board of directors of the Oregon Consumer League, and I've been executive director of Oregonians for Utility Reform. In 1978, I helped co-sponsor a ballot measure drive which eliminated the construction works in progress charges from the PGE and PP&L electric rates. And of course, we've seen a lot of price gouging going on lately with our electric rates and our telephone rates. And I can tell you that I've been going door to door meeting people, and it's one of their primary concerns that they're having to pay more and more for utility rates, and there has not been adequate justifications for these drastic increase in costs. I'm also very concerned about the property taxes. People in homes are paying a lot of property taxes, and there has to be good justification for these high levels of property taxes, and there's a definite need for property tax relief. Now that the sales tax has been struck off the ballot by the Supreme Court, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit this morning, there's only one alternative left to the property tax limitation of Ray Phillips and those folks, and that's the homestead exemption. And we have a copy of that here with us today, and Senator Brown and the Democratic Party and the Grange and the AFL-CIO are sponsors of the Homestead Exemption Initiative petition, which will be the primary topic of my next legislative breakfast a month from now in March. So you're all invited to that too, and there's a notice on the inside of my brochure as to the exact dates and topics of future legislative breakfasts. I've got 4 of them scheduled between now and the primary election, and hopefully we'll be able to keep on going all through the fall and then all through the year after that and the year after that. I think it's very important that we pull people together in North Clackamas County, exchange points of view, so we can have better government and we can stay in touch better with the people we're supposed to be representing. There's a need to develop a better community in this North Clackamas area of people that are concerned about politics, concerned about how local governments run, concerned about preserving the rural character of a lot of our county, which I particularly like about Clackamas County, that we can have cities, but you can still go down the street and find horses and pastures and even some small farms. And I really like that, and I think that's an important thing to try and preserve in Clackamas County. So the quality of life is something that's of a lot of a concern to me, and I hope to everybody in this room. I think at this point I'd like to introduce Senator Walt Brown to introduce our speaker today. I'm glad to have 2 state senators here today, Senator Wyers and Senator Brown. They are particularly independent state senators in the Oregon legislature, and I would say without qualification, people that are not influenced by the power of the special interest in Salem. And I think we're fortunate to have these people. The Oregon State Senate has been more independent than the Oregon House. The Oregon House showed itself much more willing to roll over for the power of the lobby in the last legislature than the Oregon Senate, and I think that's a tribute to the leadership qualities that these men have provided in the legislature. So I think with that, I'll tell you just a little bit about our format here. After Senator Wyers speaks, we're going to take some questions. And if you'll ask the question, I'll recognize you, and then I'll repeat the question for the mic because we're taping this for cable access television, so we want to make sure the question gets on the mic. So with that, I'll introduce Senator Brown, our local state senator in Senate District 12, and he's going to introduce our speaker, who will talk, and then we'll take questions on that subject, and then we'll open it up to any subject that you desire. Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Dave. It's a special pleasure to introduce Jan Wyers. Jan has been a colleague of mine for many years in the state Senate. I went out and walked several precincts when he was challenging the incumbent to earn his current position, and he's come a long way. Jan is currently the chair this last year. Jan is not a stranger to Clackamas County. He was a graduate of Lewis and Clark Law School, and after he graduated, the first shingle that he hung up was in downtown Milwaukee. And Jan has gone on from that very small office to be in a larger office downtown. But although he's in the big city and in a big building, he still represents little clients. If the powerful lobbyists in Salem, the people who represent the banks and the railroads and the big timber companies, Portland General Electric and PP&L, were all together in a fancy drawing room somewhere in downtown Portland and draw up a list of senators that they would like to obliterate politically, I think probably heading the list would be Jan Wyers. Jan has always had a very rough time in politics because the special interest money has always come in an effort to obliterate him. And today, Jan is working for a special initiative to curb the power of big money. In the last session, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he helped bring through the Senate a special bill on government ethics, particularly directed against the power of the wealthy lobbyist. And that bill, when it got to the House of Representatives, it fell among less fertile grounds, and finally in a conference committee, it died. Now, that legislation is in the form of an initiative, and Jan is working almost half-time, seeking to get the necessary thousands of signatures to get that initiative on the ballot. And I know Jan will tell us not only about that, just a little personal about Jan. He's a native of Oregon. He comes from Hood River. His dad was one of the famous crusading district attorneys of yesteryear, a strong proponent of family farming and public power, and himself a great figure in Oregon politics of the 30s and 40s. Jan comes from very, very very strong background. And there is no member of the Oregon State Senate who votes better. I'm very fortunate that in the roll call, Jan's name is called just one name before mine. And so as they go through the roll call, they call Jan Wyers' name, and I hear generally how to vote right. So it's fortunate that
after you've told me.
just now, there's another lady senator who appears between us, but I can remember between two names what to do. Anyway, Jan is our very good friend, and we're very fortunate to have him. He proves that Oregon politics can be honest, and that good people can still get elected.
you very much. After that introduction, I try not to feel emotional about the relationships we have in the legislature. You hear a lot about some of the negative things that go on in politics, but one of the wonderful things is the relationships you form with people you work together on a daily basis, struggling to try and do some things that you feel should be done, and that you have often that you feel you have an obligation to do. When I first, I think a good way to lead into my talk would be to talk a little bit about how I got interested in this kind of legislation. When I first ran, my wife and I started out going door to door, talking to people in our district, just as Senator Brown and his co-senator Barbara Brown taught us to do. And one of the things that I ran into over and over again in knocking on doors of people in my district and talking with them is that after we talk a few minutes, they'd say, "You seem like a nice young man. I sort of hate to support you and send you down there because you'll just become like all the rest of them." This frequently came from retired people, and that was several years ago. Hardly anyone asks me anymore when I go door to door if I think I'm old enough to do it. That was also a frequent question then. But this happened so many times that I began to think, there's something here these people are trying to tell me about politics. And of course, I've been interested in politics all my life and had read about it and been involved in some ways, but this was a nagging concern to me because it came up over and over in different parts of my district in different ways. And when I made a pledge to myself, I didn't know exactly how to say it to people on the doorstep, but I made a pledge to myself that I would remember what those people told me when I got to the legislature and make sure that I continued to represent them. And when I got to the legislature, I began seeing what they're talking about. The legislature, in some ways, some of the problems they talk about are probably inherent in the process. That when you get down to Salem, sometimes I call it you get hermetically sealed into the building there. You're there many, many hours a day, from early in the morning until late in the evening. Late in the session, you're there on weekends where there are holidays, and you begin to always be in touch with the same people. And the people who are able to hire lobbyists to be there every day have put someone there that becomes your friend. If you're not very comfortable, after a while you're beginning to think that that's what the world thinks, what these few people that you see day after day are thinking. And I congratulate Dave McTeague for making the pledge he made to you a few minutes ago that he wants to start this as a tradition of his representation of the people in this area. And I know Dave well enough to know that that he will continue to meet like this with people, and that's one of the main ways I've found to maintain fidelity with the people that I represent, is to continue to have meetings in the district to talk with people. Dave has helped me in the past to go around in the district and put invitations out on people's doors during the session to have a talk on Saturday, and you get very good feedback at those meetings. People tell you things that you don't hear in the legislature about the very legislation you're studying. One of the processes, though, that goes on in the legislature is one of mild condescension and sort of humor about people out in the rest of the state. The lobbyists try to create an impression that the only people that really know what's going on are the people there in the building every day, and that the people out there are sort of quaint, and their ideas should be listened to in a public relations way, but they couldn't seriously know what's going on. But what I found by continuing to talk with people during the session and between the sessions is that many times people who aren't able to get away to go to Salem every day have particular specific information about issues that you never hear about in the legislature that can help you introduce new bills or be aware of problems in bills that are before you or think of ways to improve on them. So as I've thought more about this problem of the legislature becoming a sort of a sealed-in place, I began noticing what were some of the things that caused it to be that, other than the long hours and the fact that some people could hire people to be there? Well, one of them is that the people who can hire full-time lobbyists, many of them can also provide an expense account to buy food and drink. So after a long day in the legislature, where there's a lot of coffee drunk that makes people nervous, on top of the nerves that are already present in a competitive, pressured system, it's very common for legislators and staff and newspaper reporters and lobbyists to go after the session day and have a drink, or eat together and drink together. And the Oregon citizens several years ago adopted an initiative requiring that there be some reporting of those kinds of activities. But the enabling legislation and the rule making that the Ethics Commission adopted to carry that initiative out watered it down somewhat to the point where there's very little actual reporting going on. The lobby has been able to push the dollar amount of reporting up to $38 a day, and it has a cost of living escalator clause on it that Senator Brown and I fought 2 sessions ago. We're not able to stop. So it went up from $25 to $38, and at $38, quite a bit of food and drink could be purchased without any reporting at all. So another way that the business lobby can influence legislators and other public officials is by inviting them to go on a trip. And even after the scandals of the 1981 session, where we literally lost the careers of more than one legislator over these kinds of excesses in these kinds of gift giving and receiving, the Savings and Loan League lobbyist went right on his merry course of inviting some of the top leaders of the legislature to go with him up to Seattle in a chauffeured travel home with a case of whiskey and the whiskey sitting here in a box with the lobbyist back with the legislators in the back of the travel hall and the chauffeur up front driving it. This has all been in the newspapers, and it's still going on. Now, we like to pride ourselves in Oregon that we're much cleaner than anyone else. Well, I have news. I was back on the East Coast 4 years ago, and I talked to some people in New Jersey where a lot of the scandals were the aftermath of the Reagan and the Nixon administration, Watergate, Agnew, and all those things. And I discovered from talking to people back there that they had a lot of investigations and a lot of prosecutions of people back there. And people back there now are very strict about many of these things. So to some extent, I think out here in Oregon, we're living in a little bit of a we don't want to hear anything bad about ourselves attitude. And we try and reassure ourselves by saying, well, we're a lot cleaner than anybody else. Well, being a lawyer, I know that's not a very good defense. If you get in trouble and you say, well, there are people all around here that are doing things a lot worse than this, officer, you shouldn't give me a ticket. We have to look after our own ethics and our own honesty in government. And if I'd be the first to say that we have, generally speaking, a very clean government, Oregon. I do believe that. There aren't people coming down to the legislature or other places in the government and handing people greenbacks under the table. There aren't people bribing people. But that's good. We want to keep it that way, but we need to improve a great deal if we really want to have citizens be able to be completely heard in the government process. So this initiative we have has three sections to it. It's short. We had a long bill in the session, but we decided after we weren't able to get that passed that we should have an initiative that was short enough that it would go on one page, so there would be as little confusion as possible. And you can see we got it on really about 2/3 of the page. It has only 3 sections to it. The most important section, I believe, is section 2, which says that people who want to go and influence the state agencies, the executive branch agencies, for example, the Public Utility Commission that sets our telephone and electric rates, the Bank Commission, that there's a big scandal going on, an investigation right now. When people go to lobby those agencies, they have to report. Currently, I think most of you will be shocked to hear there is absolutely no ethics reporting requirement for state executive branch agencies. So lobbyists can take the people who set our electric rates on a trip anywhere they want, anytime they want, without reporting it. Now, we do have a $100 maximum gift requirement, but we can all see right now with our governor in Hawaii, staying in a motel that's worth over $100 a day, with his wife there, with all that paid for, and the Oregonian defending that as just fine because he might get us some business here in Oregon, that $100 a day gift limit is not being enforced. So this initiative would say the same reporting that you have on the legislature would be on the executive branch agencies. That's Section 2. Section 1 says that you can't give, if you're a person or a group that has an interest in the government action of the person that you're giving it to, you can't give more than $10 aggregate, $10 total for the year. That will allow the farm groups to continue to give the legislators an apple. They like to give us an apple to go on our desk, or some small thing. They won't say, oh, you can't even give somebody a cup of coffee. $10 limit. And also $10 a day maximum of hospitality. Food and drink is outside the gift definition if it's but you have to report it if you go over $10 a day. So if some legislators or government agency people sit down at a table, they don't have to ask somebody to keep track of it if they buy them a cup of coffee. Or for that matter, they can buy them lunch for $10. This isn't a completely unreasonable proposal. But if they spend over $10, it has to be reported in 30 days. Then when somebody like Larry Soa, who's thinking about running for the House of Representatives, wants to know what the person in the seat that he's thinking about running for has done, they can go down and look and see if a legislator has, or some other government official has been depending on some lobbyist or lobby group for their food and drink over $10 a day repeatedly. Now, this is a reporting requirement bill, mainly. We need to have the information available so the public can make up their mind about who's influencing government. The third section, though, is an outright prohibition. That's the only provision here that would go through the courts. The first two provisions would be enforced by the Ethics Commission. But the third provision says that if you're a public official and someone hires you to get the government to do something to help them, and the public official goes to an agency of government, local or state, and says, you do this for my client or I'll do this to you, that's a crime. That's against the law. You can't do that. That's influence peddling. You can't go and say to a state agency, you send my employer some work so I'll get a commission from it, or I'll get your budget cut, or I'll get you knocked out of your job. And as you know, the Senate has executive confirmation power. So a senator literally can threaten a agency head that they will get them fired when they come up for reappointment. So we have extraordinary access to government, as do other public officials, and we have a particular responsibility to reassure that, to tell the public we're not going to go and take our job and make money off of it by pushing the government around. And some people say, well, is really any of that going on? The answer is yes, there is. There's not a lot of it, but there's some of it. And we have to stop it. We have to show new people who are thinking about coming into the process, like Dave, who I don't think needs showing, but others, that we do have a strong, open, clean government Oregon. So this is what our initiative is. My predecessor in the Senate, Don Wilner, and one of our present colleagues, L.B. Day, and I are the three chief petitioners. Walt fought for us, with us, to try and get this through the legislative session. We did pass it in the Senate. We had actually a more comprehensive measure than this that we got through the Senate after a real fight. When it got over to the House, the bill was completely torn apart in the House Judiciary Committee, and Representative Dick Springer tried to restore the language that we'd gotten through the Senate. He was only able to get 13 votes for it on the House floor. I wish you all could have been there. I wish the video could have been there and taken pictures of the lobby thundering back and forth between the two chambers when the bill would move from one to the other to ring arms. I wish there could be a video there at the back door of the House, particularly because it's a larger body and has more inexperience, that's not a nice word, more new people in it each session. To see in the last days of the session, the lobby sending notes in, getting the members to come out, and the congregation of lobbyists that are out there. They make so much noise that you can hear them in the chamber. It's literally intimidating. There are 700 registered lobbyists who are active in Oregon, and there are only 90 of us. They have us outnumbered. They're there, they're powerful, they're going to stay. Although Oregon's Constitution originally said there'd be no lobbyists, I'm sure we'll never get back to that. But we have to have somewhat of an arm's length relationship with these people, or we continue to get legislation that people say, how could that happen? Why did the legislature do that? Why are there so many shenanigans in the legislature? Well, this measure will help, I believe, create a healthier atmosphere between the legislature and the lobby, and between the state government agencies and the lobby. I think it'll get more information to the public. I think it will help new people in the process see what the ground rules are. The way it is now, there's a lot of social pressure to accept hospitality and gratuities from the lobby, to fit in. Most people who go into government, particularly elected government, desperately want to be people that fit in and are accepted and liked. We tend to be insecure people. And if we need to set the ground rules in a way that Oregonians feel comfortable about them, that they know they're going to have a responsive, open government, I think this initiative can do that. We've got a lot of work to do to get it circulated. Strider Potter, who's sitting at the head of the table here, on my right is the state coordinator. We've got to collect 75,000 signatures by early July. I solicit your help. We're going to be setting up tables in Portland. Out here, we're hoping to get some advice and assistance from Dave McTeague and Naomi and Walt and Barbara Brown and all of you on getting a table going out here. We've got the endorsements of several groups, Oregon Common Cause, the Oregon Ecumenical Ministries, Fair Share, the United Seniors, the Portland branch of the Gray Panthers, the Association of Retired Persons of Oregon. We've gotten a lot of help and encouragement from a lot of groups, but we've got a long way to go to collect all these signatures. It's going to be a real job. I'm confident if we get it on the ballot, it'll pass, and it'll be something we'll all be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Wyers. I think that's something that's high time. I think right now we'll throw it open for some questions, specifically on this subject of the ethics initiative, and maybe we should pass a couple copies around so people can take a look at it while we're talking about it. Billy's got the first question.
Okay, the penalty for breaking this initiative, this law, if it goes into law, penalty, is that a civil penalty or is that criminal?
The question is the penalty for breaking this law a civil penalty or a criminal penalty?
The third provision that I mentioned, the influence peddling provision, that you can't go to a government person and say, do what I want for my client that's paying me, or I'll do something to you. That would be a Class A misdemeanor with a maximum of a $2,500 fine and a maximum of a year in the county jail. As a practical matter, most people who are convicted of Class A misdemeanor are not sentenced to jail for a year, but that is the maximum penalty. This would be the same penalty as for being convicted of drunk driving, for example. The other two provisions would be enforced by the Ethics Commission, which has the power to levy a fine up to $1,000, I believe it is, and they can levy, they can make you pay back what you got wrongfully, which in the case of gratuities wouldn't be all that much, but the gift giving and accepting and the lobbying without reporting would all be enforced civilly through the Oregon Ethics Commission. So we have a real job to do if we pass this, to follow up with our Ethics Commission that hasn't given us as much help as we hoped they would when we were trying to get legislation passed. One of the fights going on right now is we're trying to get them to get into their budget enough money for a good computer, not a big fancy expensive one, but just one that could take the lobbyist reports and process them back quickly in a simple form where people could go and get a copy to see who had been spending what on whom. We need that to be readily available to the public.
Yeah,
We
that's
don't.
what I was gonna ask too, is there a place we can go to get this information when it's lost?
You can already insist on what information they have on this $38 a day limit, which some people are exceeding now and reporting by contacting the Oregon Ethics Commission. Betty Reynolds is the full-time worker there. She's called the executive director. I would also urge any of you that had the time and could do it to go to find out from Betty Reynolds when their next meeting is and to go to one of their meetings. They showed an amazing lack of understanding of the laws they were dealing with when we were considering legislative changes. They were grappling around. One of the things they'd done was that by rule, they had they'd put a rule in that had cut down on the reporting by rule. And after we brought that to their attention and complained about it, they changed that rule to get a little better reporting going. But they need a lot of help and encouragement. Their office is in Salem, and they're the people who take it up when there's an ethics violation and complaint.
I've got a question, Senator Wyers, and that's the other side of the coin on this whole issue is the fact that the special interests had set up political action committees, and they give a lot of money to candidates, and this certainly has a lot of influence on how people vote down in the legislature in terms of how they get their campaigns funded. Do you have any ideas about alternative methods of financing political campaigns so that we're less dependent on the special interest political action committees?
I think probably the very best way to do that is for people like yourself to make a breakthrough in finding how to reach individual voters to obtain small contributions. And that is an extremely difficult logistical, procedural thing. I've tried to do it. It costs so much money. I just sent out a mailing of 20,000 pieces, and it cost over $2,000 just to send that out. So if you wanted to send out to the in the House district, there are probably about 25,000 households.
8,000 households. In the Democratic primary.
In the
total,
Democratic primary,
about
but
maybe
in the-
about 15,000 households in the whole district.
Okay. That would cost upwards of $2,000 to
That's right.
print that and mail it, and then you could ask in that for people to give you $1, $2, $3, $5. If people would send back, if we could educate the public that if they want to break the hold of whatever lobby group that they're mad about, enough that they'd send in $1 or $2 to somebody of their choice or somebody of a party of their choice, we could have a Declaration of Independence that would be amazing. But there is a tremendous amount of consideration given to what the lobby groups want during the session because people want to be able to get contributions from it. And we do need to work on that. And after we can get this passed, I would like to work on some legislation to do it. That's an indirect approach. The direct approach is to get the money from individuals.
Right.
The indirect approach, one of them we tried to get through the legislature the last two sessions, was to have a maximum amount of money that you could accept from any individual or group and still be able to give people the political tax credit. And that was an effort to get people who wanted to get money from individuals and show that they cared about what individuals in their district thought, to say you're going to have to choose. But we get in the legislature, we get into all kinds of arguments about how much it'll be. Some people want to set it so high that it wouldn't have any meaning. That's a fight that I felt like I could only take one at a time. I've been supportive of those efforts, as Walt Brown has and many others. I think we need to keep working in that area. But there's talk now that Ronald Reagan won't even ask for or accept any matching money on the national level, and I suspect right now, if you tomorrow said to every legislator or every candidate, if you want to be able to give people political tax credits in order to get small contributions, you can't take a lot of money from political action committees. Many people would choose the political action committee money because it is so much. It is tremendously powerful. If one group or one individual can give $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000, which is happening in Oregon today, it's a real problem. It's a real concern, and I think we need to work on it. National Common Cause has made this their #1 priority. I haven't heard them coming up with the answer yet, but in the national scene, this is causing tremendous distortions with people voting for all kinds of weapons systems in a very wasteful way. I'm convinced because it'll allow them to raise money for their campaign, to run for re-election for Congress, or trying to move up for the U.S. Senate, and it's risking creating tremendous economic havoc. Is the tremendous overspending of government budgets, and it's based on a bidding war. You see it here in Oregon right now on people running for statewide office. There's a bidding war in the legislature and outside of it to get the campaign contributions of certain people. That's why Ed Fadley asked Norm Winningstad the other day how he got to the meeting. Well, he drove there in a $66,000 automobile. That's how he got
It's a
there.
Ferrari.
$66,000 automobile, and that is intimidating. Norm Winningstad gets the reaction out of some political people that the traders got out of Indians when they came here a couple of hundred years ago with beads. He puts his money out on the table. He gets his name in a number of political action contribution expenditure reports, having given over $1,000, and he has a tremendously disproportionate amount of influence with people who want to go around and woo.
He's the president of a large corporation.
President of a large corporation, and I think I have not researched it. I think much of his giving is just out of his own pocket because, well, there's some reasons for that too, but I don't want to get off on